All right, y'all, welcome back to another video. This is actually part 2 or redo of a pots with plugs looking at roots and top growth video and using the different products to see, mainly the roots, the main thing we're looking at, what do we get when we use these products? What kind of extra root growth do we get? In the last video, I made a couple of mistakes for sure. The one is I didn't take the bottoms off the pots. They all have holes in the bottom that help them to drain. And when you leave that bottom on there, the water just sits up in the pot, right? And then the roots don't have to dive because the water sits there, because that's what this does, is it retains water. So that's been taken off of every pot now so they can drain properly. The other thing is I had actually poured the mixes in, and in the case of the starter fert, it was way over applied. But in general, I think a lot of it, I don't know, I just don't think the pouring works. So what we're gonna do this time is we're just gonna dip. Each time I make a mixture, I'm gonna dip the plug in and do it that way. Hopefully the juices will retain a little better. And then the last thing is I couldn't find zoysia plugs, so we're gonna use Floratam St. Augustine this time. So with that, we're gonna get right into it. We're gonna start with one that's gonna get water only, and then all the rest will get the treatments that you see here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get them all planted and get them treated, and we'll go from there. Okay, so now I've got everything dipped and ready to go. I am gonna give them an initial watering, but I'm not gonna go so crazy this time. I'm just gonna go 8 ounces of water in each one to get them started. And then I'll also probably water them tomorrow for sure, but then I'm gonna be out of town after that. So we'll have to see if they get any more water at all. We are getting pretty consistent rain right now. So that's pretty much what I'm gonna leave them to. And then when I get back, if they need to be watered more, I will. They'll all get the same amount for sure. But I'm hoping that we just let the rain do it. Okay, but for right now, everybody's just getting 8 ounces of water just to get things going. It's not gonna be enough to have anything flowing out the bottom or anything like that. So we'll get you some before pictures here of what they look like right now so we can see the top growth that comes from this over the next few weeks. And I think I'm gonna try to leave these at least 3 weeks, maybe a little longer. Like I said, the last time we did St. Augustine, I left them for like 4 months, but that's because as you guys know, I start projects and never finish them. That one I just finished 4 months late. But anyway, there we go. All the St. Augustine plugs are ready to go. Part 2. Let's see what works, what doesn't. And remember, we got water only right back here in the corner. I'll see you in a couple, 2, 3, 4 weeks or so. All right, y'all, so here we are back again. It is 25 days since we planted these. This is St. Augustine grass this time. And so 25 days should be plenty of time to show plenty of roots, and we'll talk about the top growth. But the first obvious thing here is we're missing 3 of our products here. We actually did this planting before I went to Indiana back in like close to the middle of August 10th or so, is when we did this. And then I went away for the weekend, and when I came back, these 3 on this end, they were all dead. So I don't know what happened. I wasn't here. I was gone for that 3 days or 4 days. So whatever it was, they all died. I discarded those because just something we'll do in another test. The nice thing about this is I can just do these tests year round if I want, because it's kind of fun actually. And so maybe we'll do one of all starter fert products, and then maybe we'll do one of all the water retention products when we get to the dry season, because that's the other thing. I have not watered these even one time. We've had enough rain overall that they have not needed any water. So there's been no outside intervention on my part at all. To start off here, if we're looking at the top growth, the water only looks to be looking really good. It did get some stolons pushing across, and it actually is almost as good as the CK and the RGS. The CK actually seems to have the most top growth. The the longest stolons pushed. RGS a very close second, then the water only. The Humic 12 doesn't have as much growth. Now remember, Humic is not really a root stimulant. It is designed to chelate nutrients out of the soil that are already existing, and we plant in plain sand here, so there's nothing to chelate out. So I really don't think I will see anything with this. In the last one we did with Zoysia, the Humic only looked a little bit better, marginally better than the water only. I don't expect that to be the case all the time. I do expect CK, pure sea kelp, to also be really good, and of course RGS, which is sea kelp plus Humic. These two really should be the same. And in fact, we could even look at the concentrations of the app if we want to. But for right now, let's get into just digging these out and let's take a look at the roots and see which one did the best. Oh, look at this. Wait, come here. Got roots growing out the bottom, but we're gonna have to save those. All right, y'all, so now we got everything rinsed off, and I'll tell you that the root growth is awesome on all of these. 25 days, St. Augustine grass dives deep and wide. So looking at it overall, because I got to try to rank these, right? I mean, the water only did really well, and it did have some stolon growth. So when we compare that to the Humic 12, the Humic 12, the roots maybe look a little wider, but other than that, about the same really as the water only, but the top growth on the water only was a lot more. So again, Humic, not something we think of at planting, but it's good for existing soil. But nevertheless, on the last test, the Humic did better than the water only. So I'm gonna call that a nothing burger, really. Humic is great, but it's used for something else. Now let's move on to these two here, because these are the two that have the sea kelp in them, and these were the two I was most interested in. We'll go first to the CK, and this had by far the most stolon growth. Remember, when we're trying to grow warm season grass, yes, we want roots, but we also want stolons, because as you can see here, the stolons also push roots. So this stolon here grew crossed and pushed deep roots at the same time. So that's the CK's magic. The other thing is the tap roots look thicker. So there's a lot of like fibrous hairy roots, but there's these ones that dive straight down and deep. This has the most of those straight down diving thick white tap roots. Quite a bit more. It's deeper and it has more of those thick white diving tap roots than the water only. So CK, and it has a lot more stolon growth. So CK is a definitive help. CK definitively is better than water only. RGS, and what I want to do now is look at this, because this has sea kelp plus Humic, and we've already kind of determined that sea kelp, or that Humic is kind of a nothing. It doesn't really help when it comes to rooting and shooting with this. But we do have the sea kelp in here. So what I want to do now is I'm going to go to another clip where I compared the sea kelp concentrations with the app rate that we used for the CK versus the app rate that we used with the RGS. All right, y'all, I wanted to break in here real quick because I should have done this math for you earlier, and this is a little bit more advanced, but those of you that have been around for a while will appreciate this. Why am I seeing CK do so much better or better than the RGS when both have sea kelp? Well, that's where the concentration of sea kelp in the mix, because remember, these are concentrates, so the concentration of sea kelp in here and then extrapolate it out through the app rate is going to tell you how much actual sea kelp are we getting. And so remember, this is a 50% solution, so 50% of the CK, that is all sea kelp, 50% of it, and then the application rate is 1/2 ounce per gallon of water, and then remember I dipped the plug in there. The RGS, this is only 3% concentrated, so you have 50% concentrated sea kelp and only 3% concentrated sea kelp. Now the app rate here is more, it's 3 ounces per thousand, and when you extrapolate that out, actually this is still less sea kelp on the ground. So I'll put up on the screen now to show you, but basically when you use CK at the recommended app rate, and again we just dipped into that, you end up with 0.25 ounces of actual total sea kelp in the mix. When you use the RGS, and I use the low rate of 3 ounces per thousand, when you do that, you end up with only 0.09% of the overall mix being sea kelp. So that's why the CK does better. It's just a more concentrated mix. So my advice going forward is if you're gonna use RGS when you're doing a seeding or a sodding to drive roots or a plugging, just use, and you have RGS, you don't have to buy Kelp CK separately. I mean, you could, but really just use RGS at the higher rate. Bring this up to the 6 ounce per thousand rate, which will put you a little bit closer to what you have here. And then again, do 2 applications of this one, whereas with this one, you'd probably only need 1. So that's just kind of how you balance things out when you're on a budget and you start getting a little bit more advanced. Then you start learning how to read labels and extrapolate concentrations out over to application rates. With that, let's get right back to the results of this video. Okay, so now that we can see that, we can see though that we do have some pretty decent rooting here. We did get the deepest. This is the only one that grew deep enough to get outside of its pot. So we did get the deepest, and you know, pretty fibrous. A lot more stolon growth here than the water only. Water only did good with stolon growth. The RGS, a lot more stolon growth, but I would say that the root systems look similar. Remember, this is the only one RGS that dove all the way down and got out of its pot. But other than that, density-wise, they look very, very similar. So I'll let you glean from that what you want. I continue to use RGS as my base layer biostimulant, again, because I want all of those stolons as well as I want the deeper roots. But it looks to me, if you're just caring about roots and stolons and you want to get something that you can use for roots and stolons straight up, it's definitely the CK, which is just the sea kelp. So pretty cool. That's why I do these tests, so you can kind of see what's what. And I guess if you're doing brand new lawn with nothing else, then you would use CK. But if you're using an existing lawn, overseeding, or planting plugs into an existing lawn where the humic is going to help chelate nutrients out for the existing, then you would go with the RGS. So we'll do some more of these. I'm going to do one next on starter ferts, and we'll do a whole bunch of different starter ferts and just see what we can get there compared to water, and we'll keep moving forward. So as always, leave me your comments and questions below. We'll create a discussion, and I'll see you in the lawn.